It's a Sunday afternoon in the fall, or maybe it's the final, agonizing seconds of a championship playoff. The living room you're sitting in suddenly erupts. Grown adults are leaping off the couch, spilling their drinks, clutching their chests, or even weeping genuine tears of absolute devastation. The air is thick with anxiety and euphoria, all because a group of millionaires, complete strangers, just moved a piece of leather across a painted white line. And there you sit, feeling absolutely nothing. You look around at the painted faces, the tense jaws, the sheer, intoxicating hysteria of your friends or family. You smile politely. You offer a half-hearted, perfectly timed clap, but deep down, quiet, lingering question echoes in the back of your mind. What is wrong with me? Am I missing a fundamental piece of the human experience? Why is my brain completely blind to this magic? If you have ever felt like an alien in a room full of sports fans, I want you to take a deep breath and listen to me. For years, society has probably made you feel like an outsider. In American culture, where sports aren't just a weekend pastime but a dominant, inescapable religion, opting out feels like a social crime. At the office water cooler, during family Thanksgiving dinners, or on awkward first dates, your blank stare when someone asks, "Did you catch the game last night?" is almost always met with suspicion. They look at you as if you just confessed to hating oxygen. They assume you're boring. They assume you're overly intellectual, cynically aloof, or completely devoid of passion. But as a psychologist, I am here to tell you something that our culture completely, fundamentally misunderstands about you. You are not broken. You are not cold. And you certainly do not lack the capacity for deep, overwhelming passion. In fact, what is happening inside your mind, while the rest of the country screams at their flat screens, is profoundly fascinating. Today, we are going to look under the hood of your psychology. We are going to completely dismantle the myth that caring about sports is the default human setting, because modern neuroscience and behavioral psychology reveal a dramatically different story. The truth, your brain is simply wired to reject the synthetic tribalism that the rest of the world is so hopelessly addicted to. Think about the primal architecture of our species. For tens of thousands of years, to be a human meant to belong to a tribe. Your tribe was your literal armor against a brutal, unforgiving world. If you were cast out, you died. Fast forward to the modern era, and we no longer have to fend off predators in the wilderness. So, what did the human brain do? It desperately invented a substitute. It created modern, commercialized tribes, wrapped them in shiny merchandise, and put them in giant, glowing arenas. When the average sports fanatic watches their favorite team, their brain is hijacked by an ancient, evolutionary survival mechanism. It floods their system with a cocktail of bonding chemicals and reward triggers. But your brain sees right through the illusion. You have quietly, subconsciously tapped a psychological conveyor belt, and over the next few minutes, you are going to discover exactly why your neurological reward system refuses to play along, why your empathy is allocated entirely differently, and why your completed indifference with a score might actually be one of your greatest, unrecognized psychological strengths. Every time a quarterback wins up for a deep pass, or a point guard takes a buzzer-beating shot, the viewer's brain is flooded with a massive, intoxicating surge of dopamine. It is the exact same chemical feedback loop you see in a person sitting at a Vegas slot machine. Psychologists refer to this as intermittent reinforcement, because the outcome of the game is entirely unpredictable. The brain's reward centers lighting up with constant microdoses of anticipation and payoff. It is a wildly effective, completely legal addiction. But when you watch that exact same play, the casino is closed. Your neurological reward system simply refuses to fire off fireworks for a competition you're actively participating in. And here is the wildest part. This isn't just a quirky personality trait. It is literally written into your biology. Researchers at the University of Chicago have discovered that your level interest in watching other people compete is heavily tied to your DNA, specifically the variations in your dopamine receptor genes. So, the next time someone acts utterly offended that you couldn't care less about the Super Bowl, you can scientifically and honestly tell them that your genetic code just didn't RSVP to the party. Then we have to look at the powerful identity factor. Have you ever noticed how a die-hard fan talks on a Monday morning at the office? If their team succeeds, it's always, "We won. We absolutely crushed them." But if the team loses, notice how the pronoun suddenly, magically shifts. They played terribly. They blew it. In psychology, this phenomenon is called basking in reflected glory open bracket or BIRGing close bracket. It is a subconscious survival mechanism used to artificially inflate one's own ego by attaching it to someone else's achievements. Because you don't obsess over sports, you rarely engage in this kind of psychological outsourcing. As a result, your self-concept tends to be far more anchored. You don't need a group of athletes you've never met to validate your personal worth. Your mood doesn't crash on a Sunday night just because a referee blew a whistle. Your self-esteem is generated from within rather than being held hostage by events taking place hundreds of miles away, completely out of your control. But wait, your sport-loving friends might argue, fans are deeply loyal. We have passion, and they do. But this brings us to the ultimate misconception about you. People routinely confuse your indifference to a scoreboard with an inability to care. The truth comes down to a concept called empathy allocation. Human beings only have a finite amount of emotional bandwidth to give out. You just happen to spend yours on an entirely different currency. Instead of investing your emotional energy into a logo, you direct it out into the real world. A fascinating 2021 psychological study revealed that individuals with low interest in sports consistently score significantly higher in traits like openness to experience and a profound appreciation for art, nature, and beauty. Your brain is hunting for the exact same feelings of meaning, connection, and transcendence as the guy screaming at the television. You are just finding it in a gripping novel, a breathtaking piece of music, a fierce intellectual debate, or the actual flesh and blood relationships in your life. You aren't lacking passion. Your passion is just playing on a different field. But we also need to have a moment of complete honesty here, because for some of you listening, your disconnect from sports isn't just about dopamine, receptors, or empathy allocation. It's a lot more personal than that. For some of you, turning your back on sports is actually a deeply ingrained defense mechanism. Maybe you were the kid picked last in gym class, standing awkwardly on the sidelines, while the natural athletes dominated the field. Maybe you've spent your life feeling quietly alienated by the hyper-competitive, aggressively intense culture that so often surrounds sports fandom. Or maybe you just look at a room full of grown adults screaming profanities at a television screen and think, why would I ever voluntarily subject myself to that kind of emotional volatility? Whatever your backstory is, your reluctance is completely valid. But the real friction, the core reason you and your sports-obsessed friends often feel like you're speaking two entirely different languages, boils down to how you extract meaning from the world. Sports fans are addicted to the narrative. They live for the underdog story, the bitter, decades-long rivalry, the impossible fourth-quarter comeback. To them, a game is unscripted human drama. But when you look at that exact same broadcast, you don't see an epic gladiator saga. You see meaningless randomness. You look at the screen and think, why on earth would I surrender my emotional well-being to a situation I cannot control, executed by people I have never met, in a game that has absolutely zero impact on my actual day-to-day life? And psychologically speaking, you are entirely justified. Researchers frame this as the fundamental difference between parasocial investment and direct engagement. The sports fanatic pours immense amounts of time and energy into a one-sided relationship with a franchise that doesn't even know they exist. But you demand reciprocity. You prefer to invest your finite emotional energy into environments where your actions actually influence the outcome. You want to be an active participant in your reality, not a passive spectator in someone else's. Pioneering psychologists who study flow states, those rare, beautiful moments of being completely and blissfully absorbed in a task, have proven that human beings can reach this psychological peak in countless ways. For the guy next door, flow is analyzing football statistics on a Sunday afternoon. For you, it might be coding a new software, writing a chapter of your book, or having a deeply vulnerable conversation with a friend. In fact, there is something quietly radical about your refusal to obsess over the scoreboard, because you aren't losing your weekends living vicariously through the fabricated struggles of a sports team. You are fundamentally more present in your own life. You are engaged in your own struggles. You are building your own legacy instead of wearing another person's name on the back of your shirt. So, what is the ultimate takeaway here? If your pulse doesn't quicken during a championship game, you are not missing out on some mandatory human experience. Your neurochemistry, your tribal instincts, and your emotional bandwidth are simply calibrated for a different kind of existence. And that's a beautiful, necessary thing. The next time you're standing at a party and someone asks you, "Hey, did you catch the big game last night?" and you feel that familiar, awkward pang of alienation, take a deep breath. You don't have to fake it. You don't have to apologize. You aren't broken, and you certainly aren't boring. You are just playing an entirely different game, one where the stakes are real and the main character is you.